Imagine waking up one morning to find your country no longer has the same name. The flag you grew up saluting is gone. The song that once made your heart swell with pride is now forbidden. Your home, your history, your very identity sold. Not to another country, not after a war, but to a corporation in exchange for cash. This isn't a story of battles or armies. It's the story of a choice made from desperation that changed everything. Stay with us and subscribe, because this story will show you how one nation traded its soul for survival and how its people fought to take it back. There was once a small, beautiful country, hidden between tall mountains and quiet rivers. It was a place of laughter, music, and light. Families worked the land, children played under the sun, and everyone believed their country would last forever. Its fields were green and full of life. Fishermen sang as they cast their nets. The scent of warm bread and spice drifted through the air. It wasn't a rich country, but it was a proud one. Its people loved their flag, their anthem, and their name, freedom, unity, and home. But the world outside began to change. Trade routes closed, crops failed. Storms destroyed their farms and rivers flooded their villages. Factories shut down. Schools lost teachers. Hospitals ran out of medicine. The leaders promised hope, but hope was hard to find. The streets grew quiet. The sound of laughter was replaced by the sound of hunger. In secret, the leaders met to find a way out. They had already sold their gold, their oil, their land. Only one thing was left: the country's name. On a cold, silent night, the president gathered his ministers. The room was dark, lit only by flickering candles. He looked tired, older than his years, his eyes heavy with the weight of failure. He said softly, "If we cannot sell what we have, then we will sell who we are." The ministers stared in disbelief. One whispered, "Sir, that's madness." Another said, "A name is sacred. It cannot be sold." But the president replied, "Without money, there will be no schools, no food, no future. What good is a name if the people don't survive?" His words echoed in the cold hall. No one spoke again. The plan was set. Weeks later, a fleet of black cars arrived in the capital. A large international company had come to make an offer. Their leaders wore fine suits and expensive watches. They carried thick papers filled with promises of wealth, technology, and jobs. They said, "We can rebuild your roads, your hospitals, your schools. We can make your country strong again. All we ask in return is something simple, your name." The president hesitated, but the offer seemed too good to refuse. And so, one signature changed everything. The deal was signed. The people were never asked. The world watched in shock as the proud nation gave away the very word that defined it. The next morning, new flags were raised. They looked almost the same, but in the corner beside the old emblem was the company's logo. Passports were changed. Coins were melted and reprinted. Every border sign now bore the company's name. Even the national anthem was rewritten. The melody remained, but the words were replaced with lines praising the corporation. At first, many citizens cheered. They thought it was a new beginning. Schools received new books. Hospitals reopened. Billboards promised a new dawn for our nation. But slowly, quietly, things began to change. Children learned to say the company's name when they spoke of their home. Old songs disappeared. History lessons were rewritten. The real name of the country became a forbidden word. Grandparents whispered it at night when no one was listening. They told their grandchildren, "Do not forget who we are." But time moved on, and memories began to fade. Years turned into decades. A new generation grew up under the company's rule. They loved their country, but they didn't know its real story. They believed the logo on the flag had always been there. To them, the company and the nation were one and the same. In classrooms, portraits of the company's founder hung beside those of national heroes. Television only spoke of success and progress. No one dared to question where it all began. But deep beneath the surface, in quiet hearts and forgotten corners, a whisper of remembrance still lived. One evening, a young journalist named Era walked into an abandoned library. It had been closed for years, filled with dust and silence. She was searching for old stories, real stories. In a far corner, hidden under broken shelves, she found a small diary. The pages were yellow, the ink faded, but the words were still alive. It belonged to a teacher who had lived through the sale. It described the day the flag was lowered, the people crying in the streets, the song silenced, and the name that had been stolen. Era's heart pounded as she read, tears filling her eyes. She had grown up proud of her country, but now she realized her pride was built on a lie. Era began to ask questions. She spoke to elders who still remembered the old songs. She visited remote villages where the old flag was hidden beneath floorboards. She recorded their stories, their memories, their pain. Then she started to write. Her first article was called "The Name We Lost." It spread quietly across the internet. People began to read it, share it, and remember. One by one, old memories returned. Songs that hadn't been sung in 50 years echoed in living rooms once again. The government grew afraid. They banned her articles and shut down her website. But it was too late. The truth had been awakened. It began with whispers. Then came chants. Then came mosques. Crowds filled the streets holding candles and hand-painted signs with the old name written proudly in bold letters. They sang the forbidden anthem in one voice, a sound so powerful it shook the ground. The company called them criminals. The government called them rebels. But they called themselves the people. Every day more joined, farmers, teachers, artists, students. They all stood together, saying, "We remember who we are." The protest grew larger. The world watched in awe as an entire nation stood up to reclaim its identity. For weeks, the capital was filled with chants and songs. Tanks lined the streets, but soldiers refused to fire. Even the army had begun to remember. Finally, one night, the president appeared on national television. His voice shook as he said, "A country cannot live without its soul. Today we take back what is ours." The next morning, in front of millions, the contract was brought to the square. The president held it up, then tore it in half. The crowd erupted in cheers. The company's flag was taken down, the old flag, the true flag, was raised again. As the sun rose over the city, people wept and embraced. They sang the original anthem, every word remembered, every note filled with pride. The sound carried across the mountains and rivers, reaching every heart. For the first time in decades, the country was free again. The nation began to heal. New schools were built, this time teaching the real history. Children learned the story of how their people lost their name and fought to get it back. They learned that identity is not something that can be bought or sold. Artists created songs, films, and books about the struggle, about the power of memory and unity. The world looked on and saw not a small country but a great one, not because of wealth or power, but because of spirit. A name is not just letters on paper. It's a heartbeat. It is pride. It is memory. It carries the story of who we are, where we come from, and what we stand for. The people in this story learned that truth in the hardest way possible. They lost their name, but they found their spirit. They found their unity. They found their strength, and they promised never to forget again. Now, when the wind blows across that land, you can hear laughter again. You can see children waving the true flag. You can feel the power of a people who once lost everything but rose together to become whole again. This is the story of the country that sold its own name. A story of loss and courage that reminds us that some things, identity, love, and freedom, can never be sold, no matter the price. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and stay with us. Because there are many more stories like this, stories of hope, courage, and the power of never forgetting who we are. Thank you for watching.